Life is everything that you make it. Life is your friends, your community, your parents, your good, special, dear friends, and the time that you spend with them. It all comes together in a positive way, and never forget that.
Paul Strauch passed away this past weekend. He was at home with loved ones, and he was comfortable with his Hawaiian music playing by his bedside. He was 83 years old. His daughter Summer provided me with this quote. I asked my dad recently what he would want to say to everyone when he slipped into eternal life. He smiled and said, Aloha. If you've listened to Surf Splendor this past month, you would have been introduced to Paul and the podcast series Pod Aloha, which was produced by Paul's son-in-law, Kiernan McGuire, and it featured Paul interviewing his old pals, Greg Knoll, Gerry Lopez, Skip Fry, Fred Hemmings, and Joey Cabell, amongst them. One episode, however, featured Kiernan interviewing Paul himself, and that is what I'm going to play for you here today in memoriam of Mr. Strauch. I'd offer a short biography like I often do, this time on Paul, but Kiernan does a thorough job of that through this interview, so I'm just going to leave that to him. Or if you're interested, you can go back and listen to episode number 587 of Surf Splendor, where Kiernan and I discuss Paul and his contributions and his legacy in that intro. So a word of thanks for Kiernan McGuire and the entire Strauch family for making this episode available for me to share with you. Also a shout out to Roger Hines, who was the very first person to introduce me to Paul over a decade ago. And then also the Surfing Heritage and Culture Center in San Clemente, where Paul actually served as executive director. I used their library space as a studio for Surf Splendor when I first launched the show, and I was able to spend a lot of time in Paul's presence there. So thank you, Shaq. Also a quick word of thanks to the Surfrider Foundation, Real Water Sports, and Veyer Watches, who make Surf Splendor possible week in and week out. And then lastly, paddle outs and memorials for Paul Strauch will be held in Southern California and Hawaii. The date will be mentioned later once it is ready to go. And then also, Pod Aloha was only produced as an audio podcast. So today on YouTube, I'm going to play the original audio as it aired with an image of Paul in the foreground. And I think that's it. My name is David Scales for Surf Splendor. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Paul Strauch directly in his own words. And that's it. Aloha and rest in peace, Paul.
Surf Splendor.
Welcome to Pod Aloha, dedicated to preserving the heritage of surfing and the spirit of aloha. I'm Paul Strauch, and I'm going to take you inside the stories of surfing's biggest influencers.
And I'm Kiernan McGuire. Today, we change up our format a bit as we turn the interview lens on our own host, Paul Strauch. Tune in as he shares stories about the Duke, lessons he absorbed from his own mentors, and how he developed the maneuvers that he became so known for, including, of course, the Strauch or Cheater 5. Enjoy. Hey, aloha, Paul.
Aloha to you, Kiernan.
Good to see you.
Great to be here and great to be with you.
I know, it's really cool. We're finally sitting down and talking to you about surfing. For those of you who don't know who Paul Strauch is, or don't know all about Paul Strauch, and just know him as a really good guy and local Sano surfer and style master, he's been called one of the best surfers in the world. Gerry Lopez says he looked up to you and wished he could someday surf as well as you when he was growing up. You won the Makaha International in 1969, and maybe most significantly, you were part of the Duke Kahanamoku surf team and traveled the world helping to really spread the sport of surfing all over. So you are a living legend. Mm-hmm. And yes, if you could see Paul's face, you would see his eyes going down. One of the things that Matt Warshaw, I think, wrote about you in the Encyclopedia of Surfing, he said you have a reputation for always wanting to avoid the spotlight and never really wanted to take credit for things like inventing the Cheater 5, for example. So what was that like, Paul? There was a moment there where you're on the Duke Kahanamoku team. You're 22 years old. You're one of the most famous surfers on the planet. How did that feel to you?
That's an interesting question. Obviously, I certainly have great respect for Duke, always have. Seeing him when I was a young boy, walking with my dad along Waikiki Beach. I was fortunate enough to have a father that surfed. Had a history of surfing in Waikiki, having lived just 2 blocks from Kuhio Beach. And Waikiki is a very special back lot, if you know what I mean by that term. But people who spend time in Waikiki don't just go to Waikiki and walk along the sidewalk. They do that as well as go into the ocean. And each area of Waikiki has a very special aloha spirit, knowing that those waters were graced by many, many people for a very, very long time who fished and spent most of their lives right in that bay. So Moanalua Bay is a very, very special area, not just related to surfing, but it has great provenance for the people of Hawaii, those that were indigenous and those that came later as visitors and found their way to make that their new home. So it has a very special place in my heart, and I have deep reverence for all that it stands for, especially with my background.
Why don't we talk a little bit about how you first started surfing?
Sure. It was, I had an undeveloped lung when I was young, and so both my mom and dad felt it would be healthy for me to get down to the ocean, to breathe the salt air and have the sunshine help me and grow and increase my appetite, and the exercise would be good for my health. And so, I was down on the beach early and gradually, got on my dad's redwood board and got pushed into waves. And I'll never forget that first experience. It was totally sensory. Just lying down on the board while the board carried me on the wave, really right all the way up on the beach, in Waikiki. The waves are very gentle, and so it wasn't in any danger. But I'll never forget the visual experience of seeing, objects underneath the water, seaweed and coral, and then flashes of brilliant color from the fish that would be swinging back and forth trying to get away from the board that was riding on that wave. And that whole thing was just like, it was just magical. And I'll never forget that. And gradually graduating slowly and learning etiquette and learning patience and then learning how to stand and balance yourself on a board, and being small and having a much bigger board than would suit me at the time, trying to learn how to maneuver it, get it to change directions, and not fall off, because if you fall off, the board would continue to go on the wave, and so you end up spending most of your time just chasing the board down, and you don't want it to get damaged. So all those dynamics become a part of the whole experience. But I think once you kind of get some control of what you're doing, and that you're able to change the direction of the board slowly, you start working and improving on all of those aspects of control, and that really starts you on the way to a higher level of enjoyment.
So most people probably don't know this. Most people probably think you're a regular footer, but in fact, you're naturally goofy. You were telling me this while I was trying to work on my recovering from my broken ankle, and you said, "Oh, just switch foot and surf regular because I'm goofy," and I said, "Yes, but that's actually pretty hard." And you said, "Oh no, it's not." And then you told me about your own reasons for surfing switch foot, which you finally just adopted.
Right. I mean, I'm left-handed, and so that's the dominant side of my body. I would kick a football with my left foot, and I would dribble with my left hand. So that's my strong foot. So, in surfing, your strong foot is always your trailing foot because you lean back more than you lean forward. So all your balance is controlled by your back foot and turning, etc. But in Waikiki, I found that most of the waves, the better waves that broke on those reefs, were the ones that broke from left to right. So you would ride towards the right of the wave rather than the left. And so, I always had my back to the wave. And as soon as it broke, you'd have to come down quickly, straighten out, and then slowly, go back to try and get an angle to go right. Otherwise, the wave would hit you in the back, and then you'd lose control, and you'd have to swim. So, quickly, you don't want to swim all the time. You want to ride the wave to the end, and then, so that's what you'd have to do. You'd have to turn down, and then gradually work if you were a goofy foot, which I was. So I said, watching everybody else surf with their left foot forward, obviously they were right-handed and right-footed. So I put my left foot in front of the other one, and gradually learned that just weight and unweight from your back to the foot to your forward foot with my left foot forward. And it gradually became easier and easier, and then to turn. And so for a while I was ambidextrous, and when I'd go right, I'd have my left foot forward, and when I'd turn to go left, I'd have my right foot forward. So it would alternate like that. And then after a while, I just thought, why am I doing this? It's crazy. So I just ended up permanently surfing with my left foot forward.
Well, there you go, adapting to your environment. So you had a very special relationship with Duke. He was 53 when you were born, right? So
that's
clearly
correct.
A big age group, but you obviously got to spend a lot of time with him as part of the Duke team. Could you just tell our listeners a little bit about how the Duke team came to be?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Kimo McVeigh, who was a musician, a singer, and local guy who kind of grew up in Hawaii, and was sponsored by his mother and went into show business. And Kimo actually founded a restaurant called Duke Kahanamoku's. He thought it was his brainstorm to have Duke celebrated as a Hawaiian hero that he was, not only for his Olympic accomplishments in swimming, but also as a renowned surfer, really the godfather of surfing as far as I'm concerned, because he really put surfing on the map. And I had the distinct pleasure of being a part of the Duke Kahanamoku Surf Club named after him. And together with Fred Hemmings, Butch Van Aarstelen, we were part of that group that were actively involved with Duke.
And Joey Cabell, too.
And Joey
team,
Cabell,
right?
too.
Yeah.
Joey was very busy with his restaurant that he had started, the Chart House. And so, but he was very active with the Duke Kahanamoku Surf Club. Mm-hmm. And so we all had a fond affection for Duke. And I had a special one, too, because I was introduced to him by my dad when I was very young, and then got to know him later on when I was like 20 years old, when the Duke Kahanamoku Surf Club was formed, and the Duke Kahanamoku restaurant was formed by Kimo McVeigh. So we all kind of came together, and there's quite an age difference, between us, but I can't emphasize how special and generous a person Duke was with his time, energy, and just graciousness. It was such a true hero of Hawaiiana.
Yeah, and you guys traveled, really all over the world, right?
Well, basically we went from, Hawaii, and then Kimo got us involved in representing Hawaii to celebrate Aloha Week. Aloha Week was formed right after summer in September because there was a big tourist drop-off. Everybody came to Hawaii for the summer, and everything was bustling. All the hotel rooms were filled, and a lot of laughter in Waikiki and everywhere on the islands. But soon as Labor Day hit, and after Labor Day, everybody went back to work and back to school. So Aloha Week was a brainstorm of the government to continue the summer fair and bring everybody and allow them to stay on and have others come in, especially the Europeans. But it allowed for the beaches to continue to, be filled with visitors, and the Beach Boys to continue their lifestyle, sharing Hawaii with all of the new tourists that would come. And actually, as a result of meeting the Beach Boys and surfing in Waikiki and riding canoes, they would bring their families back over and over and over again.
It's crazy. So going back to Duke, I know that from past conversations, you told me that you had a special role when you were out doing functions and dinners and things with Duke.
Well, Duke was a special guy in many, many ways, and he loved all of us, those of us, the four of us that were on the team. But Fred Hemmings and I were able to travel a lot with Duke. And so Duke called me on the side once and he says, Paul, I'd like you to sit either on my left or my right, because, you know, we're going to invariably go out and have dinner with a lot of these guests that, you know, we would be entertained by and also meet when we're traveling and in Hawaii. So I'd like you to sit close to me so that you can help me when they ask me questions. You can help guide me and let me answer them properly. And so I said, of course, Duke, no problem. So the reason for this is that Duke was a very smart man, and at dinner, you know, everybody would be conversing back and forth, and Duke would wear his, he had these dark glasses that were like Stevie Wonder glasses, so you can't see his eyes when he put them on, and he wore them at night. You know, and I knew why he was wearing them, because people would ask him, and he says, "Oh, I just like them. I just have such a fondness for wearing them that I don't want to take them off." But Duke was an amazing man because he could fall asleep standing up. He could fall asleep sitting down at a restaurant with a lot of guests around. In fact, he used to do hard hat diving, cleaning the piers in Honolulu Harbor when he was younger. And so he put on a hard hat suit with air going into it, and he would take big scrapers and scrape the pilings in Honolulu Harbor and free them from all of the barnacles that would be growing on them. And one of the things that Duke was known for was that they found that he found it so soothing to be down there after working for maybe a couple minutes that he would take his arms and wrap it around the pilings and interlock his hands together, and he would just gently float back and forth against the piling and with the movement of the water and fall asleep. So what they did was, to counteract and not let that happen, they tied a rope around him and told him that we want to make sure if anything happens that we could pull you up and save you. And so he went along with it, but it was really designed to wake him up when they saw the bubbles coming up in one place for more than a couple minutes. And they would drag him to the next piling. So anyway, he shared all of these things with me. And so I replaced the rope, actually, because Duke would fall asleep at these dinner meetings that we'd have, entertaining, and my job was to sit close enough so that I could, when someone asked him a question, I could bang my knee up against his and get his attention, and I would repeat the question, and so that he could then respond with an answer. So we had this little thing going, and it was really great. It worked well.
That's hilarious. I mean, it's so interesting, Paul, because for guys like me, right? I mean, Duke just sits over all of surfing, and just like as you said, he's the godfather of surfing, and you knew him as a person, right? Not just, I mean, to me he's like a myth, right? I know from past conversations that you told me what a mark he left on you as a person and the way he conducted himself, and I wondered if you could, you know, talk a little bit about that. You know, what as a person, what mark did Duke leave on you?
Oh, you know, he was a very, very special person. But, you know, he was the epitome of aloha. And the word aloha is common to Hawaii. I mean, that's where it comes from. It's a combination, you know, if you broke the word down, it's alo and ha. And it literally translated from Hawaiian into English means in the presence of life. And so ha is the word for breath, but it really speaks to your whole persona that goes back ancestrally to all of the elders that came before you and connects you with everyone. So in the presence of life, was celebrated between Hawaiians when they would greet each other, and they would embrace each other by coming up, grabbing their shoulders together, and then placing their forehead on the person that they're greeting. And so you're really eye to eye, and you're bending forwards to get your foreheads connected. And then expelling your breath, or ha, it was done as an exchange of aloha. And that's the true way people greeted each other. Hawaiians greeted each other way back when.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I know, you've been called the ambassador of aloha, among other things. So when you are out in the water, when you're surfing, what does aloha mean to you in the water?
Well, you can't answer that unless I give you a little back information, to that question or circumstance when you're in the water and you're surfing particularly. Surfing takes place where the waves break, which are usually caused by a reef. And so everyone congregates on the reef waiting for the waves to come, or a set of waves to come. And they're like impulses sent in from storms that generate swells, which turn into waves when they get close to shore and break over the shallower depths as the water rushes in this process. And so if anyone has surfed, they know what happens, because you go to where all the people are, because they're not waiting, just to have conversation. They're waiting for waves to come. Right. So if you wait and watch a group of surfers sitting together, you'll see that these waves will come periodically from wind swells. And it'll go through, and they usually come in sets of 3 or more waves. And so what they're waiting for are the bigger waves, because they offer you to ride a lot longer on the waves and give you the greatest thrill. The whole objective in surfing is to stay in the steepest part of the wave and ride it to its fullest, to the end. And so when you do that, I can't imagine. It's very difficult to describe the feeling, but I can just tell you that it was really hard going to school and knowing that those waves are breaking while I'm sitting at my desk to continue to go back to school. And so truancy was a real issue for me, but I really didn't cut school much when I was going to grade school and high school. But because my parents gave me a lot of free time, as long as I kept my grades up.
Right.
But surfing is more than just riding a wave. It's being connected to the ocean and all that lives below it, and the people that live on top of it, which are other surfers. And so it's a community, and you see things. I was very observant in watching the dynamics that goes on below the water and above the water, knowing what makes waves form, the reefs, and knowing that especially in Hawaii, there's certain sea urchins that live in the reefs, and that could really cause you a lot of pain and suffering if you stepped on them. Their spikes will break off, and it's very difficult to get them out of your skin. But the same thing goes on along the top of the water. Seeing people, if you come up to a group, you'll see people look over at you. They'll size you up, because everybody out there has an objective, and that's to catch the bigger waves. And so with that in mind, knowing everyone there has that purpose in mind, that you have to also join them, and you have to make it not so obvious. Otherwise, you're going to be watched and scrutinized more than others, So it's a really human dynamic situation that, ultimately you want to make sure that you don't abuse that privilege in the group, and find a common harmony and working with each other and giving them waves, and they'll return the favor. And that's the secret, I think, to having a long surfing experience. If you can understand that, and it's tough to learn, but you have, especially when you're younger. But it's a good thing to learn earlier than not, so that you can benefit by all of the positive ramifications that come with it.
So, Paul, you've told me that one of the big impressions that Duke left upon you was what it really meant to live with Aloha. What does that mean to you when you say that?
I guess the easiest way to describe Aloha and the Aloha spirit is a person who has a very open nature and welcomes you into their world and their closeness. And it's very comforting when someone talks to you like that with a genuine interest. And so that's all part of that Aloha spirit, or connecting on that level where you feel this person is really engaging, but it's a soft engagement. It's a friendly engagement. Mm-hmm. And so that makes a significant difference, and you feel welcomed when you're in their presence.
Yeah, and for those of us who never had the honor of being around Duke, I mean, what was it that, I mean, you've talked to me about this so many times. What was it that he exuded that how did he impart that to you? Because obviously made such an impression on you and so many other people. I've just never had the chance to ask anybody else about that, because nobody else knows Duke the way that you do, that I know.
It's a good question, because everybody that had that opportunity to know him personally would speak to that same significant part of his demeanor, which is he felt. You felt welcoming when you're in his presence. He always had a twinkle in his eye. So he's focused on you. He looked straight at you when you were engaged in a conversation. And he always responded openly. He never had any self-purpose. He was always ingratiating and welcoming and kind. And those are all words that define who he was and his personality. And so it makes him to be a very special person. And I know you've come into contact with people like that there is no guile, there is no pretense, they don't have a barrier, they're not better. It's just a welcomed approach. And that was Duke.
Right. It's you too. Okay, so quote recognition time. I want to see if you can recognize who said this. He was the best surfer in the world. It was like Star Trek, like something out of the future.
I don't know who said that. Really, I don't.
The initials are BK?
Well, yes, I do know those initials very well. Barry Kanaiaupuni. And he was a special Waikiki boy I got to know in the early days in Waikiki. Waikiki has a...
Well, wait a minute. Now, see, you're going off. Do you know who he's talking about?
No.
He's talking about you.
Oh.
So here's something else that's going to be embarrassing. This is one of the best things I've read about you, and is very true in the way that I know you. So surf heroes weren't as easy to come by back then as they are now, but Paul was certainly ours. And this is Gerry Lopez writing, by the way. And it wasn't just his surfing. Paul was an elegant and graceful person. When other surfers were affecting a grubby fashion statement, Paul wore button-down collar shirts tucked in smartly to perfectly pressed slacks and polished shoes. No one had more influence on my generation of surfers in Hawaii than he did. The funny thing was, he never sought publicity, nor did he get much from the limited surf media of the time. So you obviously had a huge impact as both a surfer and a person on a generation of surfers. Is there something in particular that you like people to associate with your approach to surfing and life?
Oh boy, that's a very good question. I think I would hope that they would appreciate others just like they would want to be appreciated, because it makes it so special. And if you can eliminate any self-interest, I know everybody grows, and you grow in different times and different dimensions too. So, but it's hard to exist when you're only thinking about yourself. And so as soon as you change and transfer that attention to the people that you're around, believe me, it's recognized, and it's so much more pleasant to be around someone who's calm and collected and interested in you, right. And all of a sudden your whole demeanor changes. And so I think that's a real statement for the world at large to come into grips with and try to understand that, it's just a natural way to be. And everyone spends so much time trying to protect themselves, from being taken advantage of. And I think you lose your perspective about others.
So you've got a a star on the Surfing Walk of Fame in Huntington Beach, and you're credited by those guys in the write-up for that with creating 2 moves in the late 50s that would influence so many people and are still used today. Obviously the Cheater 5, the Strauch 5, which you're so well known for, and maybe people know this a little bit less, but also you're credited with really doing the first functional bottom turn in bigger waves as well. I mean, that's something that probably a lot of modern surfers can't even believe there was a time where that was invented, right? Because it's obviously the core part of surfing today.
Well, but what came to light when I started writing, when the waves got bigger. I mean, if you drive all the way to the country, and because there were no surf reports or anything, you knew what it was like by the size of the whitewater line when you're coming down the hill from Wahiawa and going into Haleiwa, and you look out there, and if you saw a big, thick whitewater line, between the shore and your vision, you knew that the waves were big, and then that's when your heart started beating. One way we used to try to find out how the waves were, on your way out to the country, is there's a flat section coming into the pineapple fields until you start to descend through Wahiawa and go down the hill towards Haleiwa, and where it's flat and you can't see the little bit of the horizon, but you can't really see the inside section and see if there's whitewater or not. You used to stick out your hand. If you're driving, you'd stick out your left hand, and you'd put your thumb up, and you put it in the upward direction or in the downward direction. You'd go up or down, and then you try to get a reference from people driving up, whether they had a surfboard on their car or not, to give you an indication of what the waves were like, so you can get hyped up, But as soon as you went over the top of the hill and you could see the whitewater, and if it was pretty wide, then you knew you were in for a big day. And so if you go all the way out there, sooner or later, either you see it up there, or it could grow while you're out surfing on the North Shore in height, and then all of a sudden you have to deal with it. So sooner or later it's going to come up and you're going to be out there. And so one of the things I observed real quickly is that a lot of people would paddle for the wave like you would a small wave, stand up, and immediately start to turn in the direction that you wanted to go in. And so turning at the top meant you're actually stalling. And so you're actually suspending yourself, and you're totally at the mercy of the wave, because you're going to lose forward motion until the wave and gravity take over, and then you're going to just fall down to the bottom of the wave, and then it's going to break on you, and then you have to swim all the way in to get your board. So, after you go through that one experience, you say, I'm not going to do this again. So it becomes necessary, obvious, to catch the wave a little earlier, use the curve of the wave as a slope that you could generate more speed on. So you try to back up so that the nose of your board wouldn't pearl dive. And so you back up on your board as you descend. And then what I tried to do is inch up a little bit and get more compressed on the board so that you don't lose any speed. And so you're maximizing the speed, just like a skier would do when he's coming down and jumping, in the snow. And then shuffle the board out when you're down almost at the bottom, and then put all of your weight on the inside rail, and put one foot back, so you transfer it to the rail and back, and then the board would come right around, and then you'd have to recenter yourself weight-wise on the center of the board, and then move up so that the speed of your board would actually increase. It wouldn't slow down. It would actually get faster. And then you could adjust, and with all that speed, then you would try to time the way you would come across the wave so that you'd be in the curl the whole time. And you could drag a hand, or you could turn back down to go a little further and stall that way. But it was all designed to allow you to maximize the curl of the wave and get tighter in the bigger wave.
I think it's always interesting talking to you about how some of these moves developed, right? And you're always credited with having such style, but whenever I talk to you about moves like this, you say, oh, it's just functional, right? I mean, right?
Well,
for you,
is.
it always was. You just made it look stylish, probably because of your elegance and grace and how you did it. But it's just interesting to me that that you were problem solving, right? It sounds like you were trying to solve the problem of not trying to do that turn at the top of the lip and doing it at the bottom, and then getting into a cheater 5 was giving you the ability to.
Actually, a cheater 5 was a stalling technique,
right?
Because as you got up in the front of the board, you'd actually start pushing water, and so if you calculated it right, it would kind of suspend you in that section of the wave, and then you'd have to adjust your back foot so that you could push yourself back so that you keep the speed constant. And it worked very well for that purpose.
So I wonder if this was about you experimenting with the bottom turn, but in the article that I quoted earlier that Gerry had written, he talks about, I'm going to just read another excerpt. It was a serious day at sunset, breaking at about 10 to 12 feet. Strauch paddled for a wave, caught it, and just kept paddling all the way down to the very bottom of the wave. Then, nearly at the trough, he popped up into a soul-arching bottom turn that slingshot him right back up to the top just as the wave was starting to stand up. Mm-hmm. So what were you thinking paddling all the way down the face of the wave like that? Was this part of your development of your bottom turn, just trying to get more speed?
Pretty much, I'm sure. I mean,
right.
It was trying to keep your speed, my speed on the board constantly increasing.
Right.
And so I thought if it got more steep and you continued paddling, that would be more release. The board would continue to release, and your speed would increase rather than decrease.
And did that work? Did it make a difference paddling all the way down the face like that?
To a degree, but there wasn't much time on the bottom to do too much.
Who were the people that you looked up to? You talked about Duke earlier. Who were some other folks out in the lineup that you really looked up to who helped you learn the lay of the land?
Well, first off, I have to pay homage to the Waikiki Beach Boys because they were earning a living. They were the ones who had the most experience. And when you're young, you look up to those that are there all the time, and they would stand out in the crowd because they had more grace, they had more agility. They looked stoic, and they looked like they're really having the most fun out there. So you try to emulate them. I think everybody, when they first paddle out on a board, it's so awkward. It's so, you're not used to this, the paddling, the positioning, the sitting up, and then, having the nose of the board sticking up in the air, and just getting comfortable. It's awkward. And so, I found it's easier to look at other people and try to emulate or do exactly what they're doing and look casual and relaxed than go through that pain and suffering like a lot of other people do. But the Beach Boys were the biggest influence.
Were there some Beach Boys in particular that you would single out that had a special impact on you?
Sure. There are some guys that are long gone, of course now, but there was a Filipino man named Dingo, and he was a Waikiki surfer, incredible physique, very quiet, never spoke much. Found out later that he was a very high-ranking master in martial arts, and maybe that's why he was so quiet and kept to himself. But he was an incredible gymnastic surfer, how he could rotate his body and twist and turn and always look relaxed and elegant. He would arch his back and do things that really made him stand out from the crowd. There was another guy, Squirrely Carvalho, who was, I don't know why his nicknamed Squirrely, but he sure surfed better than a squirrel would. I mean, he was an incredible rider, always in the curl and be able to change directions effortlessly. And so these guys really stood out. A couple others, Dickie Boy Abbey at Queens, he was a nose rider, and he would just be very few movements, very casual, would take off, stall the board, go back to the left, let the wave start to build up in front of him, turn real casual, and just quietly walk step by step all the way to the front end of the nose and put, both feet hang straight off the front end of the board and ride it very nonchalant and relaxed. And then as the wave started backing off a little bit, very gracefully slide step by step all the way back, and then just make the sweeping cut back to redirect the board. And then it would be, carbon copy every time he did that. but he had it down by rote. And I said, I used to marvel at that and sit, count his steps, and put, how many it took to back up and stall and then do it. And I try to do that. And, it was painful for me to learn that. But that's, I think, what everyone does eventually. You try to pick somebody out of the crowd who he's like your hero, and he's so graceful, or whatever his motions are. You wish that you could surf like him. And so if I had to make a recommendation to anybody surfing, no matter what skill level you're at, find someone who embodies the persona and the grace that you'd like to become and emulate, and then watch what they do. And then if you have a chance, watch what they do outside of the water. Because, I found that, what becomes second nature to you or natural, you don't just do it at certain times. You have a lifestyle. And if you see them calm, cool, collected, relaxed, poignant about, how they speak or how they hold their hands and gesture and everything, and a grace about them, and you watch them doing their athletic endeavor, it translates that way. So there's a connectivity in how people live and move, and dancers do this too, but surfers do this too, and I think it's a point well taken to use this to help engineer, your own enjoyment, and so having a role model on any endeavor shortens the road to success.
George Downing was a huge influence on you, and I know it was a really sad day for you when he left us recently.
Mm-hmm. He was like a surrogate father, but more like an older brother that I never had, and I always looked up to him for what he stood for and how he conducted his life, and how he was always reaching out to help others. That was the first thing, that drew me to him. In Waikiki, he spent his life on Waikiki Beach, and assisting tourists and others to learn about the ocean. He's very patient, taking them out in canoes and also surfing. And so I had the good fortune of knowing him through the Waikiki Surf Club. My dad was a member, and so I became one, and we participated in all the activities, paddle canoes, in different age groups I did, and surf with a lot of the guys there. And so I became, because George was a coach and also a highly regarded paddler, both surfboard paddler and canoe paddler and steersman. And I learned a lot about the ocean from him, from a distance, and then gradually became close to him, and we would take trips together. He was older than I was, but he became a real role model for me to follow and I learned from. And so there were so many techniques about, surfing small waves, big waves, and how to protect yourself and how to make life easier, in the water. And
what are some examples of those things?
To use a current. We were sitting at Laniakea, and the waves were 25 to 30 feet. And we stopped there because Laniakea on the North Shore, where you look straight out at the break, there's nothing that grows right there blocking your view. It's an open portal to, the break. And so we're sitting there, and it was 25 to 30 feet, and we're watching it and just looking and marveling at the size of the waves coming in, and nobody was out there, And so after watching it and saying, oh boy, so obviously, if we continue to go towards Waimea Bay and then down to Sunset, it's going to be giant there too. So I guess there's not much surfing today. And he says, what are you talking about? And I said, well, we're not going to go surfing today, right? And he goes, no, of course we are. We're going to go out here. And I go, you can't get out. There's no way that you could paddle through this. And he says, let me teach you something. You see all this water coming in, the waves breaking, and all this movement towards the shoreline, and you see how it almost looks like it's high tide? I go, yeah. He says, it's not high tide, it's medium tide. It's more low tide than it is high. Nature, is telling you something. If you watch the flow of the water, all this water is coming out. It's not going over the road. Our cars aren't being lifted up and pushed it back into the brush, right? It's going back out. I said, where? He says, you have to look closely. Look right straight in front of us. I said, yeah, it's all a reef. It's pretty shallow in there, I know. It's like maybe 3 feet, and it's like 3 to 5 feet deep, and you can go out maybe not quite 100 yards, but 75 yards, and it's still at your waist, and then it gets deeper after that. And he says, I know. And that's where it's going out. There's several areas that it's going out. It can't all go out through that one channel down there. So there's too much water coming in. So he says, why don't we get ready and we go out? And I said, oh, I really don't want to go. And he says, no, you're going to learn something. So I said, okay. So take our boards off the car, wax up. He says, just follow me. So we walk straight across the street. We're right in the center of the open space area fronting Laniakea. And we walk down this little embankment. I said, where do you want to go? He says, let's go in right here. So I said, okay, I hope we can get out. He says, we'll get out. You won't even have to paddle. And I go, paddle out against all this water coming in? He says, yeah. Watch me. Just follow me. So we push off for the beach and take about 4 or 5 strokes. And he was, God, if he wasn't right. The board actually started moving on its own, and we're in this undertow current flowing out. So it was very shallow, and I was thinking that my fin is going to run up on the reef, and I didn't want to damage it. So I got off. When I got off, the water was literally pulling straight out. So, as we went out, all the water coming in, the water going out pushed us down a little bit because the force of the water coming in sideways. So we just found we took about maybe 12 strokes, and then we're out on the reef just inside of where the waves were breaking, and it carried us out a little further, and then pushed us out into the main channel, which is going out like a freight train. And so inside of no time, we were out there, probably less than 5 minutes. And I was totally amazed. So that was one big lesson that I learned from George, how to be observant, look at all the conditions, look at the way the wind's blowing, the direction of the swell, count the waves in each set, and which one is the biggest wave in the sequence of the waves coming in, because generally that tells you something. They're going to be, nature does that, and so the more information you get, it's just like reading a blueprint, okay, this is going to give you a roadmap to utilize all the physical circumstances to your advantage. And yeah, he was a real wise person in the ocean, very wise.
So how did this session work out? Were you happy that you made it out?
Great. The waves were huge, but they were perfect. The wind was right, very light winds and glassy. And once we got outside, it would break way out there, maybe 25 feet, and roll in, and then it would back off. There was a channel deeper area, and it would reform. And so we ended up surfing where it reformed and would take us all the way through. So once you get out there, as long as you didn't lose your board, you could make it out pull out and then make it back out the channel that way. But what a learning experience. I'll never forget that.
That's an amazing story. Anything else that feel like you want to call out about things you learned from George in the water?
Yeah, just to be patient and be observant, and then keep your eye on the other guys in the water too, because they may need your help. And so it's a buddy system that really works, and it's very important. It's not all about you. It's about surfing in harmony with not only nature, but everyone else that you are surfing with. And there's a saying, my mom taught me this, Holo meka lokahi make kai, which means always flow in harmony with the ocean and the sea.
Well, that does it for this episode of Pod Aloha. Thanks for joining us. Tune in next episode. We'll be joined by Mr. Skip Fry. Aloha.